Alright, so in today's video I'm going to show you how to make a mini bust. So the tools that you will need is a spoon, a sponge, a knife, a fork, rib, you'll need water, and of course your clay. Okay, so to get started, you're going to start by making two balls that are the same exact size. So the first step to this is making a pinch pot out of two small pinch pots that you'll put together, because we're making the head first, so you're making a sphere. So the ball is going to be about 2.5 inches in diameter. So ball it up. Doesn't have to be a perfect ball. And then take a ruler and measure it and make sure that you're at about 2.5 inches. So there's one. So now I'm going to make another one, and you want these to be the same exact size, as close as you possibly can, so that when you make your two pinch pots they actually fit together. Alright, so that looks pretty close. Okay, so now to make these into pinch pots, I'm going to hold it and I'm going to dig my thumbs in the middle and then pinch and rotate. Now when you're making a pinch pot, the goal is to try and get this the same thickness all the way through. You don't want it too thin, but you also don't want it too thick. So the thickness, about 1 inch thick or a little bit smaller is pretty good. So just rotate it in your hand and pinch. You want to make sure that when you're pinching this that it's getting taller and not wider. You don't want this to get really wide. You want it to stay pretty small. So I'll do it to the other one. Until it matches the first one. Okay, so now that these are about the same size, now I just need to score and slip these together. Get my water. And then press them together so they stick. And then I'm going to take my spoon and blend them. So the goal is to make these two little pinch pots into one sphere. And you kind of want to try and make it so it didn't look like you put two together, that it was always one. Okay, so it's looking pretty rough right now, but I'm going to work on now reforming this. I don't want it to be a perfect sphere. It depends on the character that you're making. But for the purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to be making just a basic human head. And so I don't really want it to be round. I want it to be more elliptical shaped. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of squeeze it to elongate it a little bit. And to smooth this out, once I get it kind of into the shape I want, now I'm going to take my rib and I'm going to just start going over this, especially over the seam where I connected them, and trying to get this out as smooth as I can. Now as I'm ribbing this, I'm only removing a really small amount of clay. I'm more redistributing the clay from the high points to the low points. Now you'll notice, and a lot of you will have this problem, where you can tell where I put these two together because it's kind of caved in right here. So I'm going to fix that. Once I get this smoothed out pretty good with my rib, then I'm going to poke a hole in the bottom, which would lead into the neck, so it's okay that you put a hole in it. And I'm going to put my finger inside and push out those areas that are caved in a little. So I'm just kind of randomly rotating this and ribbing it until it's looking really smooth and neat. I'm just running my thumbs over it now just to really get it smooth. Kind of reshape it again, get it kind of a little bit more elongated. You might find when as I'm squeezing it, which is making it longer, and sometimes it might separate where you connected it. Just go back in there and smooth it out and rib it. Okay, so now what I want to do is determine which is going to be the top and which is going to be the bottom, and that'll help me decide where to poke the hole for the neck, so I can push my finger in there and push out any of these caved in areas. So it's looking pretty symmetrical all the way around, so it doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is I'll use this side, and I'm just going to stick my knife in and just cut like a really tiny hole and just kind of rotate the knife. I don't want this to be too big. But now what I can do is stick my finger in and push out those caved in areas. And while I'm pushing it out, I'm going to rib it. So now when I'm ribbing it against my finger that's on the inside and preventing it from caving in while I rib it. So it's getting a little better. And then once you get it to your liking, then take your sponge and go over the whole thing. It's nice to get this really smooth before you add your facial features. It's nice to start with like a really clean slate. So try and get this as smooth as you can, because once you start adding all your facial features of your character, it's going to make it harder to smooth it out. But right now, I can just go over the whole thing and get it really smooth without worrying about messing anything up. Alright, so just keep working on this, getting it as smooth and neat as you can. And then the next thing we'll do is build the shoulders. Alright, so there's the head. There's the bottom. Okay, to build the shoulders, basically it's almost like you're building a pedestal for the head to sit on. So I'm making the bottom is going to be kind of like a box, and then the top of the box will be a couple coils for the neck and then the head. So to make the bottom, I'm going to need some pretty thick slabs to support the weight of the head. So I just have a chunk of clay here, and I'm just going to make this slab by smacking it in my hand, because I want this to be pretty thick. So I showed you in a previous video how to make a slab by throwing it down. You can do that, but that tends to make really thin slabs, and I want this to be an inch to an inch and a half thick. Don't worry about it being too even, because we'll work on getting the outside smoothed out. But right now I want to work on getting 4 slabs, thick slabs. They're all roughly the same size, and that size will be determined by either a predetermined size, if you already know you want to make these slabs a certain thickness and tall and wide. I'm just going to kind of see what I can make with what I've got, this first initial chunk of clay. So here's my first slab, which happens to be about 3 1/4 by 3 1/4 inches. So now I need to make 2 more of these. If you have a fresh bag of clay like I've got here, you can take a wire, if you have one, and you can pretty much cut a slab just like this right off the top of your block of clay. Okay, Okay, so I'm going to make 2 more of those. So I've flattened this out to about the thickness I want. Now all I got to do is take my other one and put it on top and then cut it out. So to make sure that it's the same size, make sure this fits. So basically what you're making right now is a really thick slab box. Alright, so there's my second one. And got 2 more to go. Okay, so I've got my 4 square slabs here, and now I just need to score and slip these together. I'm going to do 2 on the outside, 2 on the inside, like that. And then you see the head will then go on top. Okay, so now I just need to score and slip these together. The ice cream man's driving by. So now I just need to blend these all together, get it really smooth. Now that I've blended it, I'm going to take my rib and really get it nice and neat looking, nice clean edges. You can, now with this one, you don't have to have really straight edges. You can kind of round it out a little bit. So I'm just ribbing right along the edge here to make like a nice curve. I'll curve the front and I'll leave the back straight. So this is the front of my bust. Alright, so let's see if I can move this. There we go. So there's the front of my bust. Got a little gap right here. I can just fill that in with some clay. So the way this is going to work, I'll lay it down so you can see it better, or at an angle I guess. So here's the head, and then this is the shoulders here. So now what I need to do is build a neck, and then I also need to close off the top of the shoulders here. So I think I'll do that first, and then I'll build the neck kind of on top of that. So I'm just going to take another chunk of clay. I've just got this chunk of clay here laying on the side. And with this, since this is the shoulders, I want to kind of arch this a little bit. So I want it to kind of arch up on either side to the neck. So I only want this to come in a little bit. So I'm going to cut this down about here. So this is going to go here. And then make another one for the other side. And I'm not making these too thin because these are going to be kind of helping support the head, the weight of the head. I like that. So I'll score and slip these on. Now I'm going to add a little section here, a little section here, and then build the coils, the neck, right on top. And really with these two pieces here, I can just put some thick coils in there. So I can just cut a coil that'll fit in there. So I'm going to roll a really thick coil and then determine how much of this I actually need. About here. Score and slip that one in there. Okay, that fits. Score and slip. Okay, now I've got the shoulders down. Now it's just time to work on getting all this smoothed out and symmetrical, even across. Kind of curving out in the front there. And then I'll make the back straight. So I have straight edges back here for the back, and then the front's kind of curved. So I can work a little bit more on getting this smoothed out. Okay, so there it is. And you leave the bottom open. You don't need to make a bottom. That's just adding more weight to the clay, to the sculpture. It's adding more clay than you really need. So just leave the bottom open. All right, there's that. Head is going to go here, but I need a neck. So to make the neck, I'm just going to add a couple coils depending on how tall you want the neck to be. I'm going to take a piece of small amount of clay here, roll this out. I don't want these to be too thin because I don't want the weight of the head to smush it. And I want this to just kind of go right here. So there's one. I'm going to add that. I'll put the head on top, see if it looks like that's the right height or if I need to add another one. Now whenever I add a coil like that, because I blend these in kind of rough because I know that I can just go back in here with my rib and my sponge to get this nice and smooth. I always like to rib it first, then sponge it. Okay, so now we can see that's tall enough for the neck. So if I have this here, and then my neck, and then the head, I think that looks about right. I got a little gap here. What I might do, I think what I'll do is so that I don't have to blend, because I don't want to lose the shape of this head by blending it into this neck. I'm going to add one more thin coil here that I'm going to use to blend into this neck, into the head, so that so I don't have to blend any of the head into the neck, because I don't want to lose that shape. So I'm just going to take these few random chunks of clay I have here, roll out a thin coil, kind of flatten it out a little bit because I don't want it to be too much taller. So I'm going to flatten it a little. I'm going to have it come out a little bit wider than this bottom coil. That way this extra clay that's hanging over the edge, I'm going to blend up into the head. And then I can kind of mush this down into that gap there in the front. So I'm going to blend my first coil up into this new one, and then I'm going to blend the new one up into the head when I attach that. Now the other good thing about adding this hole in the head, because this is hollow, we don't want this to explode, but now this opening goes through the neck and out the bottom, so your bust has a hole on the bottom, so you don't have to worry about anything exploding, because it's all hollow, but it's all going to air out through the bottom. Okay, now figure out which side looks like the front. Push it down. Make sure you get it in the middle. And now I'm going to take my spoon and blend the second coil up into the head. Okay, so I've blended it in. It's a little rough, so I'm going to take my rib to it and then my sponge. Make sure that if your ribs has a lot of buildup on it, clean it off before you use it. It's going to go from the shoulder up, right up to the head. And then sponge it. And this will now be the base for your bust. So it depends on the character you're making from here to then add on. You know, right now this bust, if you look at the side, it doesn't really have a chin. And if it's human, you need to kind of build out the back of the head a little bit so it doesn't just go straight down. So what I recommend you to do now is, once you have this, to then watch my how to make a mask video on how to build the face. So you have to remember this is a 3D sculpture. So what I don't want you to do now is just go in here and carve in a face. You have to add a nose, make the eyes three-dimensional. What I recommend doing is if you're doing a human and you want it to be proportionate, is to draw the facial feature guidelines, which I demonstrate in the how to make a mask video. So there's the center of the face. This is the eyes, the nose, and then the mouth, because then your chin should be, if I were to add a chin right about here, build that out a little bit. So then that means the eyes go here, and then the nose. So you see how I added that chin there. Now the only other thing, recommendation, would be that if your character has, you know, some sort of costume or clothing on, don't just carve it in. Let's say they have a shirt, and just as an example, it's a shirt that buttons up, okay, and then here's the collar. So I could just carve it in, you get the idea, but I just carved it in. But again, this is a 3D sculpture. So what I want you to do is to make this look like clothing that's on top of your sculpture. The best thing to do, or if you're making your character, you're making a like a superhero that has a mask on. So that rather than making a full mask and applying it onto the sculpture because it's going to be way too thick, use coils to outline 3D clothing. So I just roll out a really thin coil. I'm going to flatten it out, and then I would add this where the clothing is. So this is a button-up shirt. So let's pretend I scored and slipped this on, and then I'm going to blend this direction, and what it's going to give the impression that this is overlapping. This piece of cloth is overlapping this piece of cloth. And don't blend this side. And now you can see that gives the impression that it's overlapped. Of course, this still needs some smoothing out. But now it's 3D. And like I said, same thing if you're going to do a mask. Let's say this person has a mask over their eyes. Let's give them some more features here. So if you watch the how to make a mask video, you would know that the next step once you make these eye sockets is to then add an eyeball in there. So you want to make these kind of big. Make a ball that you would then add inside there for the eyeball, and then create eyelids. But if this person has a face mask on, I'm going to roll out a really thin coil, flatten it out. You got to flatten it. If you don't flatten it, it's going to stick out way too much. It's going to look funny. And so let's say this mask covers the top part of the head like Batman. So what I would do is I would take this, apply it to the outside edge of the mask, okay, how about just one that covers the eyes, like the green arrow, and I'm blending it up towards the eyes. But I'm not blending the outside edge because what I've done is create this overlapping appearance to make it look like there's a mask on top. So it almost looks like I added a full mask, but all I really did was add a coil to the outside edge. So work on all those 3D features. If the character you're making in real life has 3D features, it should be 3D in your sculpture. And that is it.